that the Kennedy family had to go through. And I've read most of the books about, assassinations and problems, and the viewers are very interested in that. Could you give us a little bit of an idea? Because, for libertarians, the CIA, we're always a little suspicious of. Is there anything that you can say about that? How do you psychologically handle that, or what are your concerns? I'm sure there's a lot of things you think about that are not factual yet, but you certainly made an effort to try to find out the truth about your dad's killing, and we really respect you for that.
Well, I wrote a book about this and kind of my journey. It's called American Values. And it's really about my family's 50-year, or actually now about 75-year battle with the CIA. And that fight actually started in the mid-1950s when Herbert Hoover, well, actually Truman, had asked my grandfather, Joseph Kennedy, to serve on a commission called the Hoover Commission that was chaired by President Hoover to look at the CIA and its role, because, as you know, the CIA, when it was originally chartered, was not chartered to engage in sort of paramilitary activities and fixing elections and murdering leaders and interfering with the business and democracies in other countries. And it was founded and created, and with great reluctance from both Republicans and Democrats, because it was thought after World War II, we had an OSS during World War II, and after World War II, OSS was liquidated because the belief was that secret police organizations were inconsistent with democratic ideals, democracies with constitutional governance, and that they would grow and that they would end up enveloping and subverting democracy. And, when Americans thought of secret police, they thought of the Stasi, they thought of the KGB, they thought of the Gestapo. And they said, and there were debates about this in Congress when we were, originally launching the CIA. And both Republicans and Democrats said this is not something we should be doing. But when they started it exclusively as an espionage organization, which meant spying. Mm-hmm. It meant intelligence gathering. It did not mean interfering. And so then, Alan Dulles, as you know, kind of manipulated the law and did a lot of kind of backroom deals to get these huge secret budgets and began really engaging in all of the mischief. And my grandfather was on a commission that looked at this and saw what they had done when they were overthrowing democracies in Guatemala and Iran and all over the world. And he said, we should dismantle it. We should remove the plans division, which was the dirty tricks division, from espionage. And Alan Dulles never forgave him or my family for that. And when my uncle came in and did the Bay of Pigs, and then fired Dulles. So I always believed that, even from when I was a little kid, when President Johnson came into the room, in the East Room of the White House, I was standing beside my father when he said to my father that Lee Harvey Oswald had just been killed by Jack Ruby. He told my father and Jackie that, and I said to my father, I said, did Jack Ruby love our family? And nobody answered that question. Later my father did his own research and found out that he was connected to the mob and to the CIA and to all these. My father's initial belief was the CIA had killed his brother. I always believed that, and I think you'd be an idiot not to believe what the congressional investigation found out in 1985, which is President Kennedy was killed by a conspiracy. But I never believed that about my dad. And I just believed that Sirhan, the evidence against him was overwhelming, and he had confessed to the crime. There was evidence found in his room. And Paul Schrade, who was one of my dad's best friends, who was standing beside my father when he was shot, and Paul took a bullet to his head. At that time, he took the first of Sirhan's bullets. And he said to me, your father was not killed by Sirhan. And I need you to look at the autopsy report and look at this evidence. And as a favor, I did not want to do that. I didn't want to get into all the conspiracy theories. But as a favor to Paul, because he was such a hero, he was the one who introduced my dad to Cesar Chavez. He was the number 2 guy at the United Auto Workers and was just a stalwart, friend of our families. I went to his house in LA, outside of LA, and I sat down with him for a couple of days. I went through the autopsy report, all this other stuff. And by the end of that, it was clear to me that Sirhan could not have killed my father.
Wow.
My father was killed by 4 shots that were all fired from behind him. Sirhan fired 2 shots. He was across the steam table. He never got behind my father. My father was always facing him. He was 6 to 10 feet away. And Sirhan fired 2 shots. The first one hit Paul Schrade. The second one hit a door jamb behind my father, right past his head, and hit a door jamb. And then he was grabbed by Rosie Greer, Rayford Johnson, and all these other people. And there was a dog pile, and they took the gun and they pointed it away from my father, but they couldn't get the gun from him. He fired 6 more shots, and all of those shots hit people. So we know where the shots all landed. There were 14 shots fired, and his gun only had 8. It was a revolver with 8 chambers in it. It never reloaded.
So,
and the 4 shots that hit my dad all came from behind. And Thomas Noguchi, who was the greatest coroner in American history, his finding is that every one of those was contact shots. The barrel of the gun was touching my father at the time they were fired, and they were fired from behind at an upward angle. I think the guy who probably pulled the trigger is a guy called Eugene Thane Caesar, who was a CIA agent. He worked for Lockheed.
Wow.
He was working that night as a security guard. He had gotten the job 4 days before.
Wow.
He was waiting for my father in the kitchen, and when my father went through the Ambassador Hotel kitchen, he grabbed him by his right arm, or his left arm, and was standing behind him when the shots were fired, and he had pulled his own gun, which was also a 22, and he was seen, and he admitted that he had pulled his gun. But he said, and my father, when my father fell, he fell onto Caesar. And if you look at the MK Ultra manual about, they have a whole section that the CIA was experimenting on creating these Manchurian candidates. And what the psychiatrists who were working for them said is that it took them a year to turn somebody into a Manchurian candidate, somebody who would actually commit a murder involuntarily.
right.
But they said they could make a distractor in 3 months, and they could make it out of anybody.
Okay, Daniel, we did a lot for a couple hours, but we
Oh,
could
that was
really
great.
use a
Wow.
couple hours. This is a
Fascinating.
great interview. Robert, I want to ask you, a long time ago when I first got interested in politics,
Well, I'm going to add it there. This was Ron Paul Liberty Report yesterday, and it was mainly Kennedy's testimony. It was aimed at the vaccine problem. But I found the first few minutes extremely fascinating. I'm a guy, I was 25 years old when Robert F. Kennedy was killed. I remember that just so clearly. Gotten in the car about 8:30 in the morning and hearing that on the radio, and I went in and told my girlfriend, and it was just unbelievable news, especially, we'd already had John Kennedy killed. Anyway, I just found this, because I just always accepted that Sirhan, I didn't watch, we're reading the news, but I wasn't a juror, or on a grand jury or anything. But it's unbelievable how it was just understood by most everybody that Sirhan was the only gun. And Unbelievable, unbelievable. I'd say that was pretty credible testimony. I mean, who would know better than the son of the man who was killed? Thank you.